Hello and welcome to another edition of Only in Illinois, your weekly recap from Reboot Illinois. I'm Madeline Dubeck here with Matt Dietrich, and in the past week, Matt, things have just been pretty big issues popping up all over the place. We've had a legislative initiated effort, or a couple of them, at redistricting reform. We've had a lot of talk about higher education and trying to fix that situation, which is still very fluid, and some pretty big tax proposals are in the mix. And so we really wanted to focus today on what is percolating out there that people need to be aware of as it relates to their wallets. So, just about a week ago, House Democratic Majority Leader Lou Lang said he intends to offer up a bill that would institute some progressive income tax rates. And there's also an amendment to the state constitution that would, if it were put to a ballot and approved by a majority of voters, would change the constitution to allow for different taxes for different ranges of income.
This has to happen in two steps, because the Illinois Constitution of 1970 said that if the state was going to have an income tax, it had to be applied at a flat rate, everybody paying the same rate. Today that's 3.75%.
Right.
So first, in order to implement a progressive tax similar to what we all pay in federal
taxes, right?
You have to change the Constitution to do that. So Representative Christian Mitchell from Chicago introduced his constitutional amendment to do that. And then a day later, on April 15th, which is traditionally tax day, Lou Lang introduced his bill, which would actually structure a progressive tax. And you would have the tax rates would start at 3.5% on the lowest incomes and go all the way up to 9.75% for the highest incomes. They have brackets that are $1 million and $1.5 million, depending on what your filing status is. Lou Lang says that
whether you're married or single, or
and he says that, and he had children and those kind of things. And he says that his plan would bring in another $1.9 billion, which is a lot less. We've had progressive tax ideas tossed out there over the years that would bring in quite a bit more than that. Lang said that he introduced his. It would not fix the whole budget crisis in one fell swoop. And he says that he did that because that way it could get support, because we would need reforms and cuts and things to go along with it to close the gap.
And it's a pretty politically savvy approach, because as he points out, it would mean really an income tax decrease for 99.3%
of all taxpayers.
Like ivory soap.
Right. Well, he's trying to put Governor Rauner on the spot for this, because Governor Rauner says we need middle class tax relief. Hey, this would give a huge tax break to the whole middle class, and that's going to be the crux of the argument here. But it's not. None of this can happen if you don't get a supermajority in the House, 71 votes.
Which is everybody, all the Democrats.
All the Democrats would have to vote for this. In the Senate, it's probably going to be pretty easy. It needs 36 votes. There are 39 Democrats. This is something that Democrats really, really have wanted for
a long time.
Oh, a really long time.
So we've been writing about this really
This was one of the biggest issues
since we started Reboot in 2012.
Right. When Reboot Illinois when our site went up right around Thanksgiving time in 2012, that was one of our first kind of point-counterpoint op-ed pieces, was progressive tax versus flat tax. It was a big issue then, but it was more hypothetical. It's a lot different this year. This year, we're coming out of a budget impasse, hopefully, and we're looking at ending the fiscal year on June 30th with $10 billion in debt. You have a Republican governor who's anti-tax, but who has said over and over again that he knows cuts alone aren't going to get us out of this mess. We're going to see taxes go up somewhere. We don't know exactly where. So now you've got a different context for this argument. So you do have, here you've got a plan that proponents say is going to cut taxes for most people, but it's going to bring in 1.9 billion, and we're still going to have some cuts. But there's a problem that you
Yes,
have
there
to
is.
have. I don't think any Republicans are going to vote for this at all.
No.
I think what we've seen is they voted very consistently with, as Governor Rauner has told them to vote. So you got to have all 71 Democrats in the House. You got to have 36 out of 39 in the Senate, which I don't think is a problem. In the House, though,
we talked to State Representative
Mm-hmm.
Jack Franks, who has been a conservative when it comes to
Right.
fiscal issues throughout his tenure. Has never voted for a tax increase
Mm-hmm.
or a budget because none of them have been balanced, he likes to say. And he told us that he intends not to vote for the progressive tax
Mm-hmm.
amendment or the bill that sets out the rates.
right.
And that he knows from having served down there for a number of years that those rates could change in a heartbeat. And like the governor, he wants to see some structural reforms first.
Mhm. And he's been very consistent on that. Reboot Illinois did a town hall in Woodstock,
Right.
and Jack Franks was part of it. And this was 2 years ago, and he said at the time, I'm not for that because we need to fix things first before we go talking about ways to get a whole bunch of new revenue flowing. That was before we had this budget crisis.
Yeah.
But something to think about is our income tax rate right now is 3.75%. The Illinois Campaign for Political Reform put on a really good budget forum last week, and one of the things that came up in it is that for an income tax increase, for every 1 percentage point you raise the income tax, you bring in another $3.2 billion.
That does not get us there. So we need to talk about revenue, whether it's looking at the sales tax and compare sales tax with other states, look at our income tax at 3.75, compare that to Wisconsin. If you're making $50,000, you pay 3.75 in income tax. You pay over 7% in Wisconsin.
We're looking at being $10 billion down on June 30th.
At least.
And this is before we've done any kind of funding for our universities. There's
Community colleges, MAP grants,
and
social service
social
agencies.
services. So if you're looking strictly at the income tax and you're looking at $10 billion and you know that a 1% 1 percentage point increase brings in 3.2 billion, I don't think anybody is seriously considering a 7 or 8% flat income tax. I just don't think that would fly.
Yeah.
So that's why I've said, you're looking at a different context for the progressive argument this year. So maybe Jack Franks, if he blocks it, that's going to go away, but we're not off the hook.
No.
It's got to come from someplace.
Right. So there could be some combination of taxes and cuts.
Mm-hmm.
You've pointed out the governor during his campaign talked about reforming the entire tax system, and he's talked about putting taxes on services. Since the election ended, he's not mentioned anything.
Right. Yeah, we haven't seen any of that talk because once the budget impasse began, all negotiations stopped. So we don't have anything from the governor to counter the progressive argument.
Right.
And now, as we've said, if Jack Franks is going to do what he says, this is all moot. But something's got to happen. Oh, and another thing that
It's moot, but it's not a done
right.
topic, is your point.
It's gonna keep
We
coming
still
back.
have to have some combination of a tax increase and some cuts
Mhm.
at some point.
And some reforms. The governor has offered procurement reform.
Right.
Hundreds of millions of dollars there. That's a topic for another only in Illinois. A lot of things that they could be doing right now to make some reforms, save some money, make the tax increase a little more bearable for us all.
Okay, so, but still, this week kind of had the effect of serving notice that now is the critical time of the year for every big legislative year. And from now until June 30th
Mhm.
is really when everybody needs to start paying attention, because they're doing things to our wallets and the way we elect people and draw our districts and what's happening with our colleges and our property taxes. lots of big stuff started popping this week. So now is when you really want to key in and pay attention.
And another key date on this, May 6th, they'll have to, if you're gonna put something on the ballot for a constitutional amendment like
Right.
progressive tax or redistricting
Redistricting,
reform, any
right.
number of things, that's gotta be done a certain interval before the election. And I believe that May 6th is the date this year, the deadline. So got a couple more weeks of really intense action, and then they'll be working on what I assume to be a 2-year budget.
Okay. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next edition of Only in Illinois.